what I want to do is kick off with the one and only AI 101. My promise today is it's not going to be a rinse repeat of everything that we've heard 1,000 times in every single session. So I'm going to set a little bit of baseline. For anyone who may not know me, my name is Kat Casey. I occasionally post on LinkedIn, and I've been spending 20 years being Sisyphus in sequins, shouting into the void to legal about, well, AI is coming. And believe it or not, 3.5 years ago, it actually came. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the basics. A lot of the folks in the room, I know you already know this, but I'm getting it out of the way so then we can go deeper and bolder and even more exciting. So, I mean, I think we all kind of know this. The robot revolution has happened. The bell has been rung. The AI takeover is in full swing, full stop. Between Anthropic, investing with co-work, between the massive funding for Harvey and Jude Law now evidently being a spokesperson for a legal tech company, AI is here in the biggest possible way. And you know, I think it all goes back to that day that will live in infamy when ChatGPT hit the stage. Not because ChatGPT was some game-changing technology, not even because the AI that it introduced was all that new. I mean, AI has been around since 1956, but because it made it consumer grade, accessible, something that even your clients were talking about, and a month and a half later, South Park was talking about it. And I always mention that not because I love Cartman, I do, but because that was when it became something my mom and dad were talking about, my nephew was talking about. That client who said the internet is interconnected tubes and I don't want to use it was suddenly talking about AI. So it made it a lot more ubiquitous, something much more common for clients and colleagues to ask about. I mean, who in here has had an RFI or a client asking how they're leveraging AI to drive efficiency in like the last week, right? If you haven't gotten it this week, you're gonna get it by Thursday, right? And one of the things that I think is really interesting and that I wanna highlight for everyone in the room is this can feel similar. A little bit like the dot-com boom, a little bit like prior tech innovation. It's not. Because we're looking at a double exponential adoption rate, right? What does that mean? Well, it took the internet 20 years to get 100 million users. I think it was what, 4.5 years for Facebook? It was 62 days for ChatGPT to get 100 million users, and that's just one flavor of LLM. What does that mean? Well, we're moving at a speed much, much faster than we have in prior tech innovation and transformations. We are accelerating that too with the ubiquity and the approval that pop culture, clients, the world around us has for leveraging AI. So that's why you're in the room. For the 1.3 million lawyers, I think about 10,000 of us might have considered ourselves tech lawyers, legal technologists. For the 1.29 million, here's your sign, you need to be in rooms like this learning about AI. So the interesting thing to me is this can feel a little bit like a hype bubble, like we've been here before, that peak of inflated expectations. Metaverse, anyone? Web3, right? The difference though is we've kind of skipped over that trough of disillusionment. There hasn't been that decline, that lack of adoption, and gone right into production. You saw that at Legal Week. You saw that at a lot of the conferences we go to. You see it with your colleagues. You'll see it with the team at Hub, who we have talking later in the fireside chat, who just rolled out 21,000 users on Claude. Why do we think that is? Well, to my mind, it's we're zoomed in too far. The AI hype curve started in 1956 with John McCarthy. We've had AI winters, we've had mass adoption, we've had people, pushing away from AI over the decades. But right now, we've got 70 years of precedent of adoption, of innovation that are driving it forward, on top of Cartman talking about AI. So we're at an interesting inflection point. And the thing that's most interesting to me, and I think most interesting for those of you guys in the room, is not just the world adopting to AI. It's our peers and colleagues going from, oh my gosh, AI feels like a zombie apocalypse. I actually didn't make this chart, which I think is pretty comical, to, it's like winning the lottery or dinner with your favorite celebrity. The sentiment has shifted. There was a report even that came out last week, hot on the heels of Judge Xavier Rodriguez talking about using AI in courtrooms. Well, 60% of the judges who replied are using some form of AI. Great opportunity, great risk, great inflection, great pivot. So Another poll for the room, because it's early and I know that I'm asking you to interact with me before you've had all of your coffee kick in. Who here is using AI? All right, is it everyone? All right, good. I used to ask that question and 3 people would raise their hands and I would have to say, well, do you use Amazon or Facebook or Netflix? Did you take a GPS to figure out how to get up the elevators in the Sears Tower? I had to. AI is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. What isn't everywhere or hasn't been everywhere is generative AI. That's kind of the new kid on the block. My 80s are showing, I know. So here's a couple things to pay attention to with this moment, and I think that's really worth noting for everyone in the room. Clients are going to be asking about this. Even in 2019, when I ran Gibson Dunn's Global Tech Program, I was getting RFIs and outside counsel guideline like, hey, how are you leveraging AI to drive efficiency? I left there in 2019 pre-ChatGPT. Everything has only accelerated. And it's not just law firms facing this. For corporations, you're getting asked by your boards, by your stakeholders, by the business, how are you leveraging AI? How are you driving efficiency? So the demand is there. We almost have to be pumping the brakes because it's gone from people saying AI is a boogeyman to AI can fix everything. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think most of you are too. Now the courts are watching. There are some liabilities we're going to talk about later in the day, from hallucinations to the Hefner case where Priv was vitiated by a client feeding notes they have from their attorney conversation into an open source AI. There's a lot of things moving and shaking, so you got to stay up to speed on it. And then it's getting embedded not just in bespoke AI tools, but in those bread and butter tools, in Lexis, in Westlaw, in Microsoft. That's a great thing, but also something that as the purveyors of risk avoidance, we need to be aware of and we need to be advising our clients about and making sure our outside counsel guidelines reflect and our internal policy reflects. So some of the 101, just to kind of get it out of the way. When I say AI, 90% of people think I only mean ChatGPT or an LLM or Claude or Anthropic. And I do. But AI is much broader than that. For the folks in the room, we've been using AI and machine learning, in e-discovery, since Da Silva Moore, since predictive coding, for knowledge management, probably a decade and a half, for contract analytics. We've been using it to build taxonomies. Often very human-driven, don't get me wrong, but this is not net new. And so I think it's important to kind of realize that when we're talking about the AI conversation. It's a spectrum. There's tools that are determinative, right? They give you the answer. Think Google, right? Think social network analysis. Think the data visualization you get in a Reveal, Everlaw, or Relativity. But then there's ones that aren't determinative. What does that mean? Well, sometimes you're going to get a different answer depending what day you ask the question. That's more on the generative side. The creativity, the broader aperture is a feature, not a bug, of generative AI. And so when you're thinking about it as a legal professional, there's different guidance you want to give depending on the flavor of AI. And depending on the risk profile of your organization, you may or may not want to apply certain flavors. Now, here's just a couple terms. Other panelists, other conversations are going to dig deeper into it, but a couple terms to be aware of. So training data. What did the model feed on and learn on? In some cases, it's Reddit. I don't know if you've been to Reddit or Twitter. That's possibly why we occasionally get hallucinations. Some of it is the entire, source code of Wikipedia. Some of it is, crossword. Understanding what fed and what trained your model is important for understanding the efficacy of the data. Is it based off of the entire database that's in Lexis, all of the cases in court, findings and decisions? Well, that's a different animal than something maybe that isn't bespoke or designed for legal. Tokens, well, that's the little bits of text that we use to turn words and phrases into the math of language. Because these AI models, certainly the generative ones, they're not wordsmiths by nature. They're just very good at guessing the next word. And the way they do that is by breaking down data into these pieces and understanding the relationship of words as tokens to each other. Prompt. That's how you tell the robot what to do. I know I'm simplifying it, but it's the way that you give guardrails and guidance and shape the output that you get for whatever task you're asking AI to do. Now, this is more the domain of generative AI. That's not how you interact with a lot of the traditional AI, so it's a new skill set. We've got a great session later today with Stephanie Clerkin, Debbie Reynolds, and Kristen Trailer digging into how do I make that more efficient? How am I not reinventing the wheel every time that I write a prompt? Output, what the robot gives you, right? foundational model, this is interesting. So foundational model is like a Claude. It's like, OpenAI's GPT 4.5 or 4.0, which was my favorite. They did retire, which makes me very sad. These are the models that these different tools and technologies are using to offer those generative functionalities. It's different from like the AI that you might have baked in through a specific service provider. It may also be what bespoke legal technology tools are built on top of. So understanding what foundational model you're working with has opportunities, risks, and also a lot of nuance in the output you get. If you go to Grok, a little spicier. If you go to Claude, a little more corporate appropriate. If you go to OpenAI, somewhere in between. Generative AI, like I said, it's that creative, it's that opening of the aperture, it's an AI that makes something. It's not finding something, it's not connecting the dots in a pattern, it's making something net new. And for legal, that is a little bit of a different risk profile. It's something you've got to advise a little bit differently on. Deepfake, all right, we've all seen the fake news of like the Pope in a Balenciaga jacket or Will Smith eating spaghetti. There's a lot of generative AI created content that may or may not be real. For those in the room, there's evidentiary concerns about that. There's the deepfake defense. I'm sure we'll dig into that some more. And then finally, hallucinations. As of today, there have been 1,390 hallucination cases. Now, does that mean this AI is terrible, run for the hills, oh my goodness, no, no, no? As with everything, it's not a bad tool, it's a bad carpenter. These are examples of legal professionals outsourcing their judgment, not doing their basic duty to supervise, not doing that critically challenging thing of clicking the hyperlink to making sure the case is real. So we've talked a little bit about what generative AI is. It's creative. There are some nuances in what that means and how you're advising your clients. We're going to dig into that a lot more, but I think it's important to know that's not the only flavor. And I put that in there just because it's funny, so I won't reference that. For prompting, it feels like a science. The team's going to dig into it a little bit more, but it really is just the way of interacting with the database and the large language model in a way that's going to give you an output. It's not rocket science, but there is art to it. There's ways to do it more effectively, and I think that's part of changing your mindset from looking at AI as a tool I master to a skill I master, right? That's a very different way of thinking about it. Like, I tell people to use AI all the time in low-risk ways so that you're building those 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell said you need to become proficient at anything. Make it muscle memory. In 52 days, I went from using Google for 25 years to using ChatGPT first. Is that the way to go? Maybe, maybe not. I still verified with something that was a direct source. Now, here's an example of what you're going to get. This is my favorite one. It was in the New York Times. Write a biblical verse in the style of King James explaining how to remove a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR. And lo, it came to pass that a man was troubled by a peanut butter sandwich that had been placed in the VCR. He said, "Oh Lord, how can I remove this sandwich from my VCR, for it is stuck and will not budge?" All right, why do I mention that? Well, you can create an output that's as unique as your voice. My voice isn't King James, I don't think, but there's ways to kind of nuance the output, to refine it, and to direct it into something that's going to work exactly for you. And that's not something we had with prior versions of AI. There's a broad litany of ways AI is being baked in across legal. We're going to dig into it throughout the day, but just be aware. It's not just the domain of e-discovery. It's not just the domain of the tip of the spear, most innovative companies. It's being baked in every aspect of practice today. And the ways people are using it are evolving at lightning speed. It's not just do this thing, connect this dot. It's help me ideate, help me draft, help me do technical tasks. I mean, coding it's not dead, but it's definitely evolving. I have a friend who's a chief legal futurist. I stole his title shamelessly. I'm the chief legal AI futurist. And he said he hasn't hired a junior coder in 10 months, even though he has an entire team of 100 people that are building code. So people are relying that on a lot more. So it's just worth thinking about the different ways you can apply both consumer-grade AI, bespoke legal tech AI, and everywhere in between. Now, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's not all roses and sunshine. I am Sisyphus in sequence saying AI is good, but there is, as everything, an asterisk, a caveat, a realization that with the good comes other blind spots you've got to be aware of. Hallucinations, we talked about that a little bit, and they're evolving. So when I would have had this talk a year ago, I would have said, okay, be wary, sometimes they'll make up a fake case. We're not seeing that as much anymore. What I'm seeing more of is it's misinterpreting a precedent. It's the wrong district. You're using a litigation for plaintiff liability when I'm doing an IP case. More nuance, which means as the subject matter expert, as the legal brain, you're becoming more important, not less. Because to spot these hallucinations, you need subject matter expertise. You need that 20 years in your practice area, your domain expertise, that the model as a generalized tool is not going to have. So for us, it's a risk. 1,395 people have faced the consequences, but it's also an opportunity. You know, and as the most interesting man in the world said, or maybe it was just me, trust but verify, and maybe even verify, then trust at this point. And that doesn't mean don't use it. It means building a human-in-the-loop way to have an audit trail to make sure that you're not outsourcing your judgment, you're supervising the tech, and you're making sure that what sounds too good to be true actually exists and is applicable for your matter. Deepfakes is another thing, and I bring it up not because to scare you guys, but there's something known as the liar's dividend, right? As AI gets better, people tend to believe that the visual output they're seeing is not real. What does that mean? Well, deepfake defenses, claims that actual authentic evidence is fake, are being brought up in court increasingly. And for the folks in the room, what does that mean? Even if you never have a deepfake case, the likelihood, if there's a highly relied upon video content, body cam footage, you know, CCTV, any of those sort of things, that they're going to be contested is increasing. There've been, I think, Elon Musk had a case from a video that was, you know, publicly circulated. I think President Obama had one as well. Just something to be aware of. It's part of that increased need to scrutinize the veracity of evidence. And we don't need new rules for it. We already have them, but just something to be aware of. And they're getting better. As much as I would love to say I do own a Viking helm and a space helmet, I do not. None of those pictures are real. That took me 3 minutes in a free app and probably 50 selfies, but that's par for the course with me, right? The barrier of entry for bad actors, state or otherwise, and we are in a lot of geopolitical upheaval, is much lower. And so the likelihood that someone might nefariously use, if you have a client who's a public figure, or if you have a high profile merger, or any of these things, it's increased. And so just something to be aware of. I mean, 20 million people believed the Pope had a $10,000 Balenciaga puffer looking pretty fly for a white guy when it was clearly a deepfake. And that was a few years ago. There's also some issues around bias, right? These models aren't inherently good or bad, but they're as reliable and unbiased as the data that's put in, the algorithm that's constructed, the people interpreting it. Sometimes inherent biases might get baked in more. In legal, that's even more risky. Maybe you're in an over-policed area and you're offering guidance on, you know, sentencing guidelines or any number of things. You might be getting inputs that are shaped by the biases of historical data. So should we be afraid? Very afraid? I mean, obviously no. I would not be running an AI conference if that was the case. There's as much opportunity or more. And for the folks in the room, I don't have a slide for this, but you have a superpower, right? What do I mean by that? Well, most of us didn't continue doing STEM in college. We focused on language, words and phrases, going more liberal arts. That's the superpower. The way you access AI today is with syntax, is with issue spotting, right? Sounds a little bit like law school IRAC, right? Issue, rule, ... Our precision with language and ability to parse problems uniquely equips us to be prompt, just total gurus. So if we can master that basic entry point of AI, we leapfrog even STEM experts because we have that language, that logic, that ability to structure and reason and, you know, treat the AI like a junior associate we're trying to direct on what to do. So I've got a couple resources up here if you guys want them. I've got a free prompt primer, access to me on LinkedIn if you guys want to get my book. That's not free, but I do recommend it. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for kind of coming on this journey with me. The day is going to be very dynamic, very engaging. Our next session is actually going to be TED Talks. If you look at the table underneath your agenda, everyone actually has a worksheet. I'm going to make you work. So if you don't have a pen yet, you might want to run by the front table and grab one, because we're gonna put you to work. This is not an audience. You guys are my fourth microphone. Literally, I'll be putting it on the table and circulating with you guys. It's all about engaging you guys and making this useful. So, with that, I'm going to set up the next session. If you need a pen, run out. But thank you guys so much, and let's get this party started.